Hello, guys. How's it going? So, I'll be taking a quick review session of the first exam. So, let's see. Let's go one by one. So, the first question is, which of the following would not allow society to move to point H in the above figure? So, this is the production possibilities frontier. And as you can see in the green curve, that is our production possibilities frontier. And in production possibilities frontier, we usually have productive as well as allocative efficiency. So by productive efficiency, we mean that this is the best possible use of our resources for production, for the sake of production. And by allocative efficiency, we mean that this is the most desirable allocation which the society wants. So we have productive as well as allocative efficiency at the production possibility frontier, which basically means that if you try to go beyond the production possibilities frontier, we do not have enough resources to do that. So we could do so only under certain circumstances. For example, if we are able to increase our capital or labor, or if we are able to improve our technology. So this point H, we can go to this point H, which is basically unattainable, but we can attain it if we are able to do one of these three things, like increasing the quantity of capital, labor, or improvement in technology. If we are at point F, it means that we are basically underutilizing our resources and we are not being efficient. Since the green curve, the green line, that is the only curve where we are being efficient. So the answer here is, of course, A. More efficient utilization of current resources would not allow society to move to point H, because green curve is our most efficient utilization. Let's move on to second question. Between points B and C in the above figure, the opportunity cost of 250 more bushels of corn is. So if you remember the definition of opportunity cost is in order to produce something extra, some extra units of something, how much of the other good that you have to give up. So while moving from point B to point C like this, we are producing 250 more bushels of corn, but at the same time, we are also having to give up 200 yards of cloth. So the answer is B, 200 yards of cloth. Moving on to the next question. The law of demand implies, holding everything else constant, that as the price of yogurt, so what does law of demand say? This is your graph. This is price P1, this is price P2, this is quantity Q1, this is quantity Q2, right? So as the price increases from P1 to P2, the quantity demanded of yogurt would decrease from Q1 to Q2. So the answer here is 3. Moving on to the fourth question. Typically, the greater the specialization of resources. So when you are specializing in something, it means that you are better at producing something. So so basically you are able to produce more. So your production possibilities frontier will fan out like this. So the production possibilities frontier will fan out once you specialize more. Specialization means that you're able to produce more of the same good. So the answer here is D. Fifth question. In June, buyers of titanium expect the price of titanium will fall in July. What happens in the titanium market in June, holding everything else constant? So the law of demand holds only when everything else is constant. It is called ceteris paribus. So what is happening here is that the price of titanium will fall in future. So the buyers of titanium, they would wait, they would reduce their demand in anticipation of a further decrease in price, because if they wait, they'll be able to buy titanium cheaper in future. So in the present times, they will wait. So the quantity demanded at all price would reduce due to anticipation of lower prices in future. So because of this, at each price, the quantity demanded will be less. So at each price, the quantity demanded will be less. So at all these prices, we will have a lower quantity demanded than previously. So the demand curve will shift towards the left. So the answer is A. Moving on to the sixth question. Well, let me see if the recording is on. Right, it's on. So the sixth question, to affect the market outcome, a price ceiling. So this is the sixth question. And if you look at this graph, right? So suppose this is our equilibrium price. And suppose we set a price P1 here. This is a price ceiling. So remember, what is price ceiling? Price ceiling is just a ceiling, a rooftop, or a limit on the prices. So the prices cannot increase above the price ceiling. So if we set P1 as our ceiling price, it means that the prices cannot go above this P1. So you are flexible to set your prices anywhere here below P1, right? So suppose, so basically, if you set your price anywhere below P1, this is not in itself going to affect the market outcome, because the price that you actually set, that could be anywhere below this, and that could affect the market in its own ways. But what happens if you set the price below the equilibrium price that is here, which is P2? If you set the price ceiling here, there's a ceiling price. So if you set the ceiling price here things become different. Here what is happening is that your ceiling price is less than your equilibrium price. So you only have flexibility to set your price below this price P2. So in this area, so suppose you set your price below this somewhere over here. So here, suppose this is your actual price that you set. So what is happening here? There is a huge gap between quantity demanded and quantity supplied. So this is the resulting gap. It means that there is a huge shortage, right? So if you set the price, if you set your price ceiling below, so the suppliers, they are not able to raise their price above P2. They'll have to set it somewhere below P2. So this, if you set the ceiling price below the equilibrium price, that will bring about a visible change. That will bring about a different market outcome. So the answer is it must be set below the equilibrium price. Last month, the Tecumseh Corporation supplied 400 units of 3-ring binders at $6. Now it's supplying the same quantity at $4. So based on this, what it has experienced. So take a look at this graph over here. So this is the quantity that it was supplying earlier at $6. Now it is supplying the same quantity at $4. So this can happen only when the supply curve moves from S1 to S2. So supply curve is shifting towards the right-hand side. So the answer here an increase in supply. So since your supply curve is shifting towards right, moving on to question 8 about production possibilities frontier indicates. Suppose your production possibilities frontier is straight like this. So what is slope? Slope is basically change in y, change in the quantity of y upon change in the quantity of x, change in quantity, so which is delta y by delta x is slope. Along this green line, the change in y with respect to change in x is the same everywhere, is constant. That is why we say that this line has a constant slope. But if our production possibilities frontier is curved like this, the slope is constantly changing. This means that the change in y with respect to x, change in x, is not constant. So the slope is not same, which also means that the trade-off between the two goods is constantly changing. It's not constant. So that is why the answer is C. Ninth question. Economics is best defined as how people make their choices. This is pretty easy. 10th question. Suppose the current unemployment rate is 15%. If it rises to 20%, then what happens? So unemployment rate is rising. So the supply of labor is less. So the resources that we are using at our disposal, we are using less labor. So we are using less resources. It means that our production possibilities frontier has to shift inwards. So the correct answer is A. So the economy will, oh, sorry, my bad. So the economy will operate inside the production possibilities frontier in this part, since we are not able to, so we are not able to efficiently utilize our labor supply. So as we saw in the first question here, we are at point F when we are not able to efficiently utilize our resources. So in this case, we are not able to efficiently utilize our labor. So we will operate somewhere inside here. So the economy will operate farther inside the production possibilities frontier, A. Question number 11. The growing popularity of energy conservation has enticed large home improvement stores like Home Depot and Lowe's to offer tankless water heaters. So now they are offering these products. So how will this affect the market? So for the same price, we will have more quantity of tankless water heaters. So this will happen at each price level. This means that our supply curve will shift to right like this. So B is the correct answer. Moving on to question 12. The difference between the lowest price a firm would have been willing to accept and the price it actually receives from the sale of a product is called, it's called producer surplus. If you go look up the definition of producer surplus, this is the exact definition of producer surplus. 13th question. The decline in popularity of clothing made from animal fur. So because of this, what happened? JCPenney discontinued the sales of animal fur. So clearly, because they discontinued the sale of the animal fur for the same price, we'll have less quantity supplied of fur clothing. So for each price, we'll have less quantity. This is your quantity, and this is your price. So for each price level, we will have less quantity supplied. So the supply curve will move towards left. So D is the correct answer. What is the difference between increase in quantity, increase in demand, and increase in quantity demanded? Right? So take a look at this. So these are quantity demanded, and these are our prices. So for price P1, quantity demanded is Q1. For price P2, quantity demanded is Q2. For price P3, quantity demanded is Q3. When we plot this relationship between all the prices and all the quantities demanded at those specific prices, what we get is our demand curve. So this curve is called demand. So all the relationships, so when we talk about quantity demanded, we have to specify the price. When we say the quantity demanded is Q1, we have to ask at what price. So quantity demanded is Q1 at price P1. Quantity demanded is Q2 at price P2. Quantity demanded is Q3 at price P3. So when we plot all these prices and all these quantities demanded, we get this curve, and that is called demand curve, or that is called demand, right? So when there is an increase in quantity demanded at all these prices, then we'll have a shift in our whole demand curve like this. If you merely increase the price from P1 to P2, the quantity demanded will decrease from Q1 to Q2, but the demand curve will remain the same. So if you increase so this happens when everything else is constant. Ceteris paribus. When everything else is constant, when price increases from P1 to P2, the quantity demanded decreases from Q1 to Q2 when everything else is constant. But the demand curve remains the same. But if at all these prices, if at each of these prices, the quantity demanded is lesser than usual, the quantities demanded is lesser than usual, then, or more than usual, then the demand curve will shift towards left or right. If the quantity demanded at each of these prices is more, then the demand curve will shift to right, and otherwise it will shift to left. So the difference between increase in demand and increase in quantity demanded is that an increase in demand is represented by a rightward shift in the demand curve. This is increase in demand. Right? While increase in quantity demanded is represented by movement along the curve. So the answer is A. Now for the next question, we have to refer to this figure. So increase in population would be represented by what? So population is increasing. It means that we have at the same prices, we will have more quantity demanded. So at each price level, we'll have more quantity demanded because of the increase in population. So because of this fact, the demand curve will shift towards right, as we have seen here. So there will be a shift from D1 to D2. Hence the answer is C. Question number 16. Again, referring to the same figure, a decrease in the price of a complementary good would be represented by. So what is a complementary good? Something that complements the other good, something that goes with the other good. That is called a complement or complementary good. For example, hot dogs and hot dog buns. So you usually don't just eat the hot dog buns, or you usually don't just eat the hot dogs. These two are complementary goods. So what happens when the price of a complementary good goes down? So suppose hot dogs is our main good and hot dog buns is our complementary good. So what happens if the price of the hot dog buns goes down? When the price of the hot dog buns goes down, it means that you have more money left to buy more hot dogs. So you will buy more of the hot dogs. So the hot dog demand will increase, and this will cause a shift from T1 to T2. So the answer is C. Holding everything else constant, an increase in the price of the MP3 player will result in, again, pretty standard, pretty simple, increase in price from P1 to P2, like this, will cause the quantity demanded to decrease. So the answer is C. Question number 18. The total amount of producer surplus in a market is equal to. So refer to this diagram here for producer surplus. So this is your producer surplus and this is your consumer surplus. And producer surplus plus consumer surplus is your total surplus. So what is producer surplus? It is the area. This is your supply curve, the red line, and the green line is your demand. So producer surplus is the area above the supply curve, below the market price. So the answer is A. The following equations, next question, question 19. The following equations represent the demand and supply for silver pendants. What is the equilibrium price and quantity? So at equilibrium, the quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. QD is equal to QS. So 50 minus 2P is equal to minus 10 plus 2P. So 4P is equal to 60. Therefore, P is equal to 15. So since P is equal to 15, Q is equal to, you can put it in either of these two equations. Q will be 50 minus 2 into 15 is equal to 20. So the answer is A. Question number 20. An increase in the price of pineapples will result in, so this is again a standard supply curve. So as the price increases, the quantity supplied, this is QS, because this is supply curve. Remember, in demand, when price increases, the quantity demanded decreases along the same curve. But in a supply curve, as the price increases, the quantity supplied at each price also increases. Right? So increase in the price of pineapples will result in a larger quantity of pineapples supplied. Question number 21. If in response to an increase in the price of chocolate, the quantity of chocolate demanded decreases, then the economists would describe this as, we would describe this as a decrease in quantity demanded. Simple. The answer is in the question itself. So the answer is A. In Venezuela, the government attempted to control rising food prices by implementing price ceilings in the market, right? So we have just seen what happens in price ceiling. So this is your price ceiling. And this is your equilibrium price. So if you set it below, if you set the price ceiling below your equilibrium price, what is happening? This is demand curve. So this is your quantity demanded. So suppose this is price ceiling and you cannot go above this price. You cannot go above it. That's why it's price ceiling, right? So you have to set your price below this here. So suppose you set it here, right? So this is your quantity demanded and this is your quantity supplied. So there's a huge gap in quantity demanded and quantity supplied. There'll be a shortage. So the answer is below. If you set the price ceiling below the equilibrium price, the price ceilings were set below the market prices, which resulted in shortages of food because the suppliers will not be able to get adequate profit. So they will pull out the supply from the market, and that will result in shortage. So hence the answer is A. Moving on to question 23. So this is basically about absolute and comparative advantage. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is in absolute advantage, you have to think who is producing more. So somebody who is producing more in the same resources, then that guy has absolute advantage. When you talk about comparative advantage, we have to think in terms of opportunity cost. Which guy has less opportunity cost? So if somebody has less opportunity cost than you, then he has more comparative advantage. So if somebody has less opportunity cost of producing something, then he has more comparative advantage than you. For example, for producing one more apple, if you have to give up two oranges, and suppose for producing one more apple, your neighbor has to give up only one orange, it means that your neighbor's opportunity cost is less than yours. So your neighbor has a comparative advantage. So that's the difference between comparative and absolute advantage. So in absolute advantage, you're just looking at who is producing more in the given amount of resources. So in this table, as you can see, Sarita is producing more pies and more cakes. So she has got a comparative advantage in both. So the answer is D. Sarita has absolute advantage in both because she's producing more in both cases. So Sarita has an absolute advantage in baking pies as well as cakes. A similar example, but things change a little bit here. Linda is producing more. So Linda is bathing 60 dogs. Linda is bathing 10 more dogs than Sandy. So she has absolute advantage in bathing, but in grooming, Sandy has absolute advantage, right? So the answer is C. Linda has absolute advantage in bathing, and Sandy has absolute advantage in dog grooming. Question number 25th. If a farmer is producing 5,000 bushels of soybeans at point B, we know that. So it is simple. We have taken two questions of similar type. When you are inside your production possibilities frontier, it means that you're not efficiently utilizing your resources. So the answer is B. The farmer is not using his resources efficiently. Question number 26. It is correct to state that a society which is on its production possibilities curve is, again, same question. On production possibilities frontier, we have two types of efficiencies, productive and allocative. So we are fully utilizing our productive resources. So the answer is pretty straightforward. It's B. The primary purpose of economics is to understand how people make, same question again, choices. And what is macroeconomics concerned with? Question number 28. In macroeconomics, we talk about the behavior of the economy as a whole, right? We talk about the economy of a city or country or a state. So the correct answer is D. Which of the following will shift the demand curve for good? So there was one question about complementary good. So the same answer, when the price of the complementary good decreases, then at each individual price, we'll have more quantity demanded of our actual good. So this will cause a shift in the demand curve. So the answer is D. Last question, if the United States enters a war in the Middle East, the economy will go into recession is an example of. So just two things here to keep in mind. A normative statement is what should be. So we are basically talking about ethics and morality, what should be the case. But in a positive statement, we are merely making a logical statement about an actual situation. So if there's a war in the Middle East, the economy will go into recession. So remember why we are not calling it a factual statement? It's because the economy has not yet gone into recession. If the economy had already gone into recession, we would have said, hey, that's a factual statement. But since the economy has not gone into recession, this is merely a logical deduction that it will go into recession because of the war, which usually is the case. So we are not talking about how the case should be. So that is the reason why it is a positive statement. So the answer is D. Well, that's all from here, from me now. We'll meet up next time for a review session of the next exam and probably one of the homeworks. So that's it from me now. Thank you. Good luck.